So the first question here is kind of an open one. What is the cultural significance of ancestors? How do cultures use or view their ancestors? And once again, there's no right or wrong with this question ever. It's just a big idea to open up with our discussion. I see Elizabeth typing. Yeah, that's great. So they are they're bringing some sort of respect to your current state, right? By acknowledging a line of ancestry before you. Is anyone here in this session interested in their own ancestry? Like, do you look into it, or do you have relatives that talk about it? Yeah, awesome. So I think it's become, especially in the U.S., that's a very common thing to look into our ancestry because we are such a culturally blended nation. So, you could have a relative, from one part of the world and a relative completely from the other part of the world, and that makes sense where we are geographically and how we came from and where we came from. But other cultures that have less sort of migration aren't quite as interested in it. But we'll look at this one culture that uses ancestry in the ancient world. This piece might look familiar. If you guys could type on the board, let me give you your board tools. Right there. If you guys could type on your board what each thing is. So this line over to the left is pointing to the top of the statue, and the line to the right is pointing to the bottom of the statue. This is just from your own idea. Yeah, it's the head. Hello, Erin. Yeah, you got it. It's the Easter Island figures. Welcome, Erin. We are pointing out the different parts of the sculptures that we're looking at. The line to the left, as Elizabeth just pointed out, that's the head. But what is this line over to the right? It makes sense what it is, but I just want to see what you guys think it is. Yeah, the body. So since these pieces were found, most people who were studying them or looking at the images thought that they were just Easter Island heads, and for a long time they were known as just the heads because we couldn't see what was underneath the head, which was, the body. Why couldn't we see the body? It was underground, and it wasn't buried there. Actually, you'd think it was buried, but it wasn't purposeful. So what happened to the ground that made it so that the body had sunk down? Keeping in mind that we are on an island, lots of water. Wet, weakened, right, and erosion. So it's a mixture of those things. So why, so erosion and weak soil, why would soil all of a sudden become weak? What has to have been taken out of it? And this is an issue that you hear about in the mudslides happening in California and around the world. What has happened to make all of a sudden these ginormous mudslides and increased erosion? It's a man-made, a man-done thing. Yeah, loss of plant life, in particular trees. So trees and their roots not only get water via the soil, but they also hold on to the soil. They imagine they act as anchors. So as we have an increased amount of deforestation, we also have an increased amount of landslides, which is why there's such a big push for people to plant trees out in the West Coast and really any areas that heavily deforested, is to actually stop those mudslides. So if your questions about the artwork here, is there anything in particular you want to add or bring up about this piece as well? So we can maybe change that from question to also observation. Do you already know anything about these pieces? I know someone already knew the name. They're also in a semi-famous movie, series of movies. Night at the Museum, right. Most people know it from Night at the Museum. As I recall, he likes bubble gum. Yeah, right. And that's a good association to remember these by. But I will move forward. And we'll have Lipsy. Let me turn on the video camera. I don't know how I look with this lighting. This will be new to all of us. Okay, a little crazy. My living room is a lot warmer right now, so that's where I've moved to. This is my cappuccino for the day. I hope we all have some sort of warm drink or beverage or even just warm water to make us feel more cozy with the subject. So the Moai of Easter Island. So when was the island discovered? The day is in the island's name. Easter, right. So this was called Easter Island because it was found on Easter Sunday by explorers, I believe, in the late 1800s. And when they arrived in the island, it was completely deserted. So there were no people on here at the time. Maybe there was a small traveling tribe, but they were not actually living there, like they were like traveling through. And imagine coming to this ghostly island with almost no one there, and these giant heads just sitting along the shore and looking out at the water. And some of them were also looking in. Now, there are lots of theories about these pieces, but because the culture that built them, the original people who created them, no longer exist or left a record of them, we're just piecing stuff together from what we know about the Pacific Island cultures. And as you guys might know from Moana, that a lot of these cultures are nomadic and they hopped from island to island to settle. Which brings us to our question of the day, ancestry, right? Now, why do we think that these sculptures, even though they look very similar to one another, could possibly represent ancestors? This is very basic information that we put together as archaeologists and art historians. It's what we know about or can guess about the most specific cultures. So this is great. Ancestors' achievements are something to be recognized and to be proud of. And even if you were to go to places like Hawaii today, it is well known that you shouldn't go to certain islands or certain beaches if you're not a native from that area. And it's a very protective sort of culture, especially since Westerners have come in and taken so much, which is very true. If you're asking any Pacific Islander there. And there's a strong link to ancestry that's very similar to like the clan mentality in Scotland and Ireland and other smaller indigenous cultural nations around the world. There's a very protective energy. And simply, the reason why we think these represent the ancestors of the people who lived on Easter Island is probably because much of the work that you see in the Pacific coast, in the Pacific area and region, almost all represents ancestry in some way. There's even strong beliefs that based on the island that you're from, you can have a cosmic ancestor, so sort of like a god or a demigod or someone who's become a god or was the wife of a god or something. There's a strong link to ancestry even in their cosmology. So this is why, it's very simple, we're like, these probably represent the ancestors of the people of Easter Island. Now, the people of Easter Island clearly spent a huge amount of time and effort to create these pieces, so much so that they stopped looking at their own care of their island. And we know that the reason why these have sunk in the first place is because deforestation. So what were the original people of the Easter Island doing to the island that might cause all those mudslides? Using the trees, right. Using and burning the trees, and their population was getting big enough that they were using more and more of the trees, and they weren't growing back in time. And this is super common in a lot of island nations. Iceland, for one, Iceland is known for its barren, beautiful, moss-covered, just empty lands that lead up to eventually a volcano or something, or a glacier. But Iceland used to be densely covered in trees when the Nordic people landed there. And it took only one generation for it to become deforested. It happens very quickly on an island versus a continent. So the U.S., we have deforestation, but it actually takes several generations for it to have gotten to this point of digging up or taking plants out for mudslides to happen. And that's because our tree networks are large enough that they can connect with other tree networks. Seeds can travel across from one state to the next to be carried by animals and such, and it's not as difficult for us to continue our plant life. Versus trees traveling, their seeds traveling across the ocean, they eventually will. Birds going from one island to the next will eventually leave droppings and help it to start growing again, but it takes like a millennia. It takes a long time for it to happen naturally. So today in Iceland there are huge forestation efforts, so reforestation I think is the word, where they're planting trees. But the same thing happened in Easter Island. As soon as they started taking a lot of trees, if you think you take 50% of them, the others just start to die. The network starts to like cave in. And so we believe a portion of it died at the end, so the people actually created their own destruction. And all that was left behind were these giant sculptures. Now, kind of like the stones, like these are super heavy rock sculptures, and kind of like stones from Britain, they have a hard time figuring out how people moved them around. They couldn't figure that out. And that actually goes to the next thing I have for y'all. Believe it or not, the ridge right here of these eyes right above the forehead actually serves a purpose. If y'all can go to this link, let me see. The box is too short. Let me expand it. Sorry. It's not giving me a hard time. Now it's trying to open for me. I just want to expand the box. Boop. Man, guys, I am not looking out with this today. Here, let me try just putting the link in the box for you. I swear. And I am posting it in the chat box now. This is a YouTube video that might surprise you, but this is what some physicists figured out. And once you're finished watching the video, which is only 1 minute and 46 seconds, you don't have to watch the whole thing to get the point either. Give me a check mark to show me that you're done, and write down something that surprised you on the board. Yeah, so it looks a lot like you're moving furniture, right? What they have developed. Excellent. You can tell it takes a lot of people still to move these giant, heavy rocks, but you can do it. You can make them literally walk across the island. Good job, guys. I'll go to the next slide. So looking at our own cultural canons. So think about our own culture in the U.S., maybe on TV or in the internet or in your own hometown. What is the way in which we honor our ancestors? If you have an idea, you can type it in the chat box, or if you have an image, you can post it on the board. I actually have an idea. I'm going to go find my image. Open up Google. Sorry, my dog got scared. Let me mute that quick. My goodness, my dog gets so upset if some neighbor should shut their door. Sorry, I'm sure it surprised y'all. So yeah, we have these giant monuments to our nation's ancestors. And then also, there's maybe something smaller too. I have here a commemorative bench, which I don't know if y'all have anyone in your family or know someone who's done things like that. In my grandparents' hometown, they have bricks that you can buy with a family member's name on it. And the people don't necessarily have to be dead in order to be commemorated, but yeah. Do you have a big dog too, Erin? They only have one volume. Yeah. All right. Give me a check mark if you're good to move on. Cool. So to update you guys on some contemporary Pacific Island artists, this is a woman, and her name is, I'm going to try and say it, Paula Schaffhausen. Yes, I do believe that she had, like, her father is of German ancestry or is in fact German himself. But on her mother's side, she is a Pacific Islander, and that's what she considers herself to be. So all her work deals with her own heritage here. The name of this work is called Ebbing, I'm going to try to say it, Tagaloa. Features a series of Tagaloa, or a Polynesian god of the ocean. The figures represents 19 beaches and bays of Wellington by Paula Schaffhausen, and molded from coconut oil and sand. The figures will melt and harden with fluctuations in room temperature. Throughout the exhibit, the installation speaks to issues faced by low-lying cities across Oceania, including Wellington. So Wellington is her hometown that she's really working with. And so we see these itty-bitty, essentially fertility gods that also represent the god of the ocean. And you can see how they are fully created in the back corner, but as you get closer, I guess they're closer to a heating vent or a window, and the coconut oil has started to melt, and these little sculptures have started to fall apart. So my question for you guys is, how do you think she's using the concept of ancestry, and what comment do you think she's making on her ancestry right now? If you guys want to link to the article about her work, I have it right here below, which I did not copy in there. Sorry about that. I'm looking forward to reading this response. Mythological reference to the pollution is God or ancestors in this place. The fact that the pieces are being destroyed represents the destruction. Excellent. Perfect response. Yeah. Do you guys think that, do you all agree with Elizabeth? Do you think the artist is being pretty clear about her message? Y'all give me a check mark or an X too. Okay. Cool. Thanks for your response. And just remember, if you step away from the computer, that's okay. Just put up the away button. Excellent. So that I won't think, I won't try and call anyone. Okay. So this is the point in which, as honor students, I would ask you guys a question. And it would be on our message boards, but it would always start here. And just as to give you an example of the kind of question I would ask, imagine everything that came before is just to give a background to have you start thinking about an idea. The kind of question I'll end up asking will be something like this. It'll be something big, a little bit dicey, like does an artist have to be a member of a group or culture to make work about that group or culture? And this is the same thing I'll put in the forum thread. And, oh yeah, definitely, Erin, ask away. And there is no right or wrong, but it would just be an open discussion and about different things in terms of the arts and the artist. And this is a great time for questions. Can you be taken out of it till you get all your grades back up? So I believe how it works and how most teachers are doing it is that you're in it until you ask to be taken out completely. But how you turn your things in is always on your own time. So technically the honors section isn't going to start until the next semester. I just have things I opened up early so that y'all can see what the things are. But all of the stuff for our honors section isn't due until the end of April. Unless you want to turn it in earlier. Does that help? Okay. So my suggestion for you guys, how I've heard it from our principal, is if it ends up being too much of a burden, even come May, if a student finds that they haven't done enough in honors and will bring their grade down, they're just going to drop the honors credential and excuse you from all the honors work. So even if you find out, after April due date or something come May that you just can't get it done, it's not going to hurt you. And so I like that our principal believes in that we only want you to do it if it'll help you, and if in the end it's not going to help you, he will make sure that it can't hurt you. So it will not bring your score down. I'm looking forward to honors too, guys. It's going to be like a little bit of icing on top of the cake. It's going to be really cool. As I was telling you guys earlier, the only other way to get an honors art class in particular is to go to a magnet school. So this means that when you apply to colleges or to other art programs, you can actually have a resume and a transcript that is similar to those magnet school students, which is pretty sweet. Okay, so How can we describe the style or process of the moai? And I will go backwards real quick just so that you can see the original image, these guys right here. Just so you can see the original image to trigger your ideas. So how was it made for process? And how would you describe the style of it to someone? I'll give you a minute to type out your ideas. It's been a quick day. So, yeah, Polynesian ancestral, carved from stone, then walked across the island. Yeah, and also you can say too, when we're talking about style, don't be afraid just to think, how would I describe this to someone who didn't even know the word Polynesian? Like, how would I describe this to my 4-year-old cousin? And so I might say it seems pretty basic and geometric. Maybe that word might be too complicated. So maybe I'll say kind of simple and really large. Just things like that too. And those will help, that always helps us. As soon as we come up with a word to describe what we're looking at, all of a sudden we can actually remember that word or remember that piece more. So compare and contrast. The works of this week are very different from the work last week. So it's easy to come up with differences. Possible religious significance? Yeah, that's a great link right there. A lot of the Pacific cultures, it was called ancestor worship, where you actually worship your ancestors kind of as gods. If you guys remember from one of the opening scenes in Mulan, her dad's actually praying to the ancestors to help them so that Mulan doesn't embarrass them. Yeah, the Book of Kells is really soft and detailed and expensive versus the Moai is really large and carved and basic. But the Book of Kells has to really be protected in order to preserve itself, whereas the Moai have truly stood the test of time. They've been exposed to the elements, and they're still here. Maybe they'll be here after we leave. Excellent. Give me a check mark if you guys are ready to move on. So what works, like the Moai, how do you think it impacts the art world? Imagine those explorers coming up to see these sculptures for the first time on that Easter Sunday. What did they learn from these pieces? And there is journal entries from the explorers talking about how they didn't know that there were no natives there. But as their boats came up, they got worried that this would be a warring nation, and they were like supposed to be afraid. Everyone in the late 1800s was afraid of cannibals. That was like a very common fear. So there's lots of articles where people they think cannibals are just everywhere. So it appears simple, but it's significant to the local cultures. Yeah. Bye, Erin. Yes, obviously lots of work put into them. They're definitely detailed. All right. And lastly, before we finish today, if you guys could tell me, how does this work impact you? I'll take a box too. Oh, there he goes again. I told him to stop barking, so now he's putting his head on the ground and doing one of those little roof, roof barks. So it makes you think about how much and why I devote my time and energy. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting how we start to look into our own heritage, if it's cultural or if it's genetic, or if it's even just on a family level, how we start to bring those own stories into our work too. Excellent. I'm going to turn off the recording.